Hey Ben, I just wanted to come on and read the rest of the book that we were reading. I finally had access to the building and I was able to get it out of the classroom. So I'm just going to read to you the remaining chapters of Welcome to the Dead House, the Goosebumps R.L. Stine book. So remember, the kids moved into the new house and the girl kept thinking that she was seeing people, and then they met friends, but the friends couldn't be out after a certain time. They could only be out when the sun wasn't really shining. And then when they were playing a game and they were in a circle at the cemetery, they noticed that the names on the cemetery plots were the names of the kids they were hanging out with. Chapter 15. They're going to kill us, Josh cried. I watched them move forward in silence. Josh and I had backed up to the window. I looked around the dark room for an escape route, but there was nowhere to run. Karen, you seem so nice, I said. The words just tumbled out. I hadn't thought before I had said it. Her eyes glowed a little brighter. I was nice, she said in a glum monotone, until I moved here. We were all nice, George Carpenter said in the same low monotone, but now we're dead. Let us go, Josh cried, raising his hands in front of him as it was a shield himself. Please let us go. They laughed again, the dry, hoarse laughter. Dead laughter. Don't be scared, Amanda, Karen said. Soon you'll be with us. That's why we invited you to this house. Huh? I don't understand, I cried, my voice shaking. This is the dead house. This is where everyone lives when they first arrive in Dark Falls, when they're still alive. This seemed to strike the others as funny. They all snickered and laughed. But our great uncle, Josh started. Karen shook her head, her eyes glowing with amusement. No, sorry, Josh. No great uncle. It's just a trick to bring you here. Once every year, someone new has to move here. Other years it was us, and we lived in this house until we died. This year, it's your turn. We need new blood, Jerry Franklin said, in his eyes glowing red in the dim light. Once a year, you see. We need new blood. Moving forward in silence, they hovered over Josh and me. I took a deep breath, a last breath, perhaps, and shut my eyes. And I heard the knock on the door. A loud knock, repeated several times. I opened my eyes, and the ghostly kids all vanished. The air smelled sour. We've got to get as far away as we can before they catch us, Mr. Dawes said, backing down the driveway quickly, the tires sliding and squealing as he pulled onto the street. Yes, I agree. Thank goodness you came. My house, it's filled with kids, dead kids. So you've seen them, Mr. Dawes said softly, his eyes widened with fear. He pushed down harder on the gas pedal. As I looked out into the purple darkness, a low orange sun began to show over the green tops. Where are my parents? I asked anxiously. There's a kind of outdoor theater next to the cemetery, Mr. Dawes said, staring straight ahead through the windshield, his eyes narrow, his expression tense. It's built right into the ground, and it's hidden by a big tree. I left them there. I told them not to move. I think they'll be safe. I don't think anyone will think to look there. We've seen it, Josh said, a bright light shining suddenly flashed onto the back seat. What's that? Mr. Dawes said, looking into the rearview mirror. My flashlight, Josh answered, clicking it off. I brought it just in case, but the sun will be up soon. I probably won't need it. Mr. Dawes hit the brake and pulled the car to the side of the road. We were at the edge of the cemetery. I climbed quickly out, eager to see my parents. The sky was still dark, streaked with violet now, and the sun was a dark orange balloon just barely poking over the trees across the street beyond the jagged row of gravestones. I could see the dark outline of the leaning tree that hid the mysterious amphitheater. Hurry, Mr. Dawes urged, closing the door quietly. I'm sure your parents are desperate to see you. We headed across the street, half walking, half jogging, Josh swinging the flashlight in one hand, and suddenly at the edge of the cemetery grass, Josh stopped. Petey, he cried. I followed his gaze and saw our white terrier walking slowly along a slope of gravestones. Petey, Josh yelled again, and began running to the dog. My heart sank. I hadn't had the chance to tell Josh what Ray had revealed to me about Petey. No, Josh, I called. Mr. Dawes looked very alarmed. We don't have time. We have to hurry, he said. Then he began shouting for Josh to come back. I'll go and get him, I said, and took off running as fast as I could along the row of graves, calling to my brother. Josh, wait up. Don't go after him, Josh. Petey is dead. Josh had been gaining on the dog, which was ambling along, sniffing the ground, not looking up, not paying any attention to Josh. And then suddenly Josh tripped over a gravestone marker. He cried out as he fell, and the flashlight flew out of his hand and clattered against the gravestone. I quickly caught up with Josh. Josh, are you okay? He was lying on his stomach, staring straight ahead. Josh, answer me. Are you okay? I grabbed him by the shoulder and tried to pull him up, but he kept staring straight ahead, his mouth open, his eyes wide. Josh! Look, he said finally. I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that Josh wasn't knocked out or something. Look, he repeated, and he pointed to the gravestone that he had tripped over. I turned and squinted at the grave, and I read the inscription, silently mouthing the words as I read. Compton Dawes, R.I.P., 1966 to 1996. My head began to spin. I felt dizzy. I steadied myself, holding on to Josh. Compton Dawes. It wasn't his father or his grandfather. He had told us that he was the only Compton in his family. So Mr. Dawes was dead too. Dead as everyone else. He was one of them, one of the dead ones. Josh and I stared at each other in purple darkness, surrounded by the dead. Now what, I asked myself. Now what? Chapter 16. Get up, Josh, I said, my voice a choke whisper. We've got to get out of here. But we're too late. A hand grabbed me firmly by the shoulder. I spun around to see Mr. Dawes, his eyes narrowing as he read the inscription on his own gravestone. Mr. Dawes, you too, I said. So disappointed, so confused, so scared. Me too, he said almost sadly. All of us. His eyes burned into mine. This was a normal town once, and we were all normal people. And most of us worked in the plastic factory on the outskirts of town. Then there was an accident. Something escaped from the factory, a yellow gas. It floated over the town, so fast that we didn't see it. We didn't realize. And then it was too late, and Dark Falls wasn't a normal town anymore. We were all dead, Amanda. Dead and buried. But we couldn't rest. We couldn't sleep. Dark Falls was a town of the living dead. What? What are you going to do with us? I managed to ask. My knees were trembling so hard I could barely stand. A dead man was squeezing my shoulder. A dead man was staring hard into my eyes. Standing this close, I could smell his sour breath. I turned my head, but the smell already choked my nostrils. Where are Mom and Dad? Josh asked, climbing to his feet and standing rigidly across from us, glaring accusingly at Mr. Dawes. Safe and sound, Mr. Dawes said with a faint smile. Come with me. It's time for you to join them. I tried to pull away from him, but his hand was locked on my shoulder. Let go, I shouted. His smile grew wider. Amanda, it doesn't hurt to die, he said softly, almost soothingly. Come with me. No, Josh shouted, and with a sudden quickness, he dived to the ground and picked up his flashlight. Yes, I cried. Shine it on him, Josh. The light could save us. The light could defeat Mr. Dawes as it had Ray. The light could destroy him. Quick, shine it on him, I pleaded. Josh fumbled with the flashlight and then pointed toward Mr. Dawes' startled face and clicked on. Nothing. No light. It was broken, Josh said. I guess when it hit the gravestone. My heart pounding, I looked back at Mr. Dawes. The smile on his face was a smile of victory. Chapter 17. Nice, Mr. Dawes said to Josh. Nice try, Mr. Dawes said to Josh. The smile faded quickly on his face. Close up, he didn't look so young and handsome. His skin, I could see, was dry and peeling, hung loosely beneath his eyes. Let's go, kids, he said, giving me a shove. He glanced up at the brightening sky. The sun was raising itself over the treetops. Josh hesitated. I said, let's go, Mr. Dawes snapped impatiently. He loosened his grip on my shoulder and took a menacing step toward Josh. Josh glanced down at the worthless flashlight, and then he pulled his arm back and heaved the flashlight at Mr. Dawes' head. The flashlight hit its target with a sickening crack. It hit Mr. Dawes in the center of his forehead, splitting a large hole in the skin. Mr. Dawes uttered a low cry. His eyes widened in surprise. Dazed, he reached a hand up to a hole where a few inches of gray skull poked through. "Run, Josh," I cried, but there was no time to tell him that. He was already zigzagging through the rows of grays, his head ducked low. I followed him, running as fast as I could. Glancing back, I saw Mr. Dawes staggering after us, still holding his ripped forehead. He took several steps that abruptly stopped, staring up at the sky. It was too bright for him, I realized. He had to stay in the shade. Josh had ducked down behind a tall marble monument, old and slightly tilted, cracked down the middle. I slid down beside him, gasping for breath. Leaning on the cool marble, we both peered around the side of the monument. Mr. Dawes, a scowl on his face, was heading back toward the amphitheater, keeping in the shadows of the trees. He's not chasing us," Josh whispered, his chest heavy as he struggled to catch his breath and to stifle his fear. "He's going back. The sun is too bright for him," I told him on the side of the monument. "He must be going to get Mom and Dad." "That stupid flashlight," Josh cried. "Never mind that," I said, watching Mr. Dawes until he disappeared behind the big leaning tree. "What are we going to do now?" "I don't know." "Shh, look." Josh poked me and he poked me hard on the shoulder and pointed. "Who's that?" I followed his stare, and I saw several dark figures hurrying through the rows of the tombstones. They seemed to have appeared from out of nowhere. Did they rise out of graves? Walking quickly, seemed to float over the green, sloping ground. They headed into the shadows. All were walking in silence, their eyes straight ahead. They didn't stop to greet one another. They strode purposefully toward the hidden amphitheater, as if they were being drawn there, as if they were puppets being pulled by hidden strings. "Whoa, look at them," Josh whispered, ducking his head back behind the marble monument. The dark, moving forms made all the shadows ripple. It looked as if the trees, the gravestone, and the entire cemetery had come to life, and it had started toward the hidden seats of the amphitheater. "There goes Karen," I whispered, pointing, "and George and the rest of them." The kids from our house were moving quickly in twos and threes, following the other shadows, as silent and businesslike as everyone else. Everyone else except Riley, I thought, because we killed Ray. Everyone except Ray, I thought, because we had killed Ray. "We killed someone who was already dead? Do you think Mom and Dad are really down in that weird theater?" Josh asked, interrupting my morbid thoughts. His eyes on the moving shadows. "Come on," I said, taking Josh's hand and pulling him away from the monument. "We've got to find out." We watched the last of the dark figures float past the enormous leaning tree. The shadows stopped moving. The cemetery was still and silent. A solitary crow floated high above in the clear blue cloudless sky. Slowly, Josh and I edged our way toward the amphitheater, ducking behind gravestones, keeping low to the ground. It was a struggle to move. I felt as if I had weighed 500 pounds, the weight of my fear, I guess. I was desperate to see Mom and Dad and to see if they were there, but at the same time, I didn't want to see. I didn't want to see them held prisoner by Mr. Dawes and the others. I didn't want to see them killed. The thought made me stop. I reached out an arm and hauled at Josh. We were standing behind the leaning tree, hidden by its enormous clump of upraised roots. Beyond the tree, down in the theater below, I could hear the low murmur of voices. "Are Mom and Dad there?" Josh whispered. He started to poke his head around the side of the bent tree trunk, but I cautiously pulled him back. "Be careful," I whispered. "Don't let them see you. They practically reach beneath us. They are practically right beneath us. But I've got to know if Mom and Dad are really here," he whispered, his eyes frightened, pleading too. "Me too," I agreed. We both leaned over the massive trunk. The bark felt smooth under my hands as I gazed the deep shadows casted by the tree. And then I saw them. Mom and Dad. They were tied up back to back, standing in the center of the floor at the bottom of the amphitheater in front of everyone. They looked so uncomfortable, so terrified. Their arms were tied tightly at their sides. Dad's face was bright red. Mom's hair was all messed up, hanging wildly down over her forehead. Her head bowed and squinting into the darkness cast by the tree. I saw Mr. Dawes standing beside them, along with another man, an older man. I saw that the rows of long benches built in the ground were filled with people, not a single empty space. Everyone in town must be here, I realized. Everyone except Josh and me. They're going to kill Mom and Dad, Josh whispered, grabbing my arm, squeezing it with fear. They're going to make Mom and Dad just like them. They're going to come after us, I said, thinking out loud, standing through the shadows at my poor parents. Both of them had their heads bowed now as they stood before the silent crowd. Both of them were waiting their fate. What are we going to do? Josh whispered. Huh? I was stared so hard at Mom and Dad, I guess I momentarily blanked out. What are we going to do? Josh repeated urgently, still holding desperately to my arm. We can't just stand here. And I suddenly knew what we were going to do. It just came to me, and I didn't have to think hard. Maybe we can save them, I whispered, backing away from the tree. Maybe we can do something. Josh let go of my arm. He stared at me eagerly. We are going to push this tree over, I whispered with so much confidence that I surprised myself. We're going to push this tree over so the sunlight will fill the amphitheater. Yes, Josh cried immediately. Look at this tree. It's practically down already. We can do it. I knew we could do it. I don't know where my confidence came from, but I knew we could do it. And I knew we had to do it fast. Peering over the top of the trunk again, struggling to see through the shadows, I could see that everyone in the theater had stood up. They were all starting to move forward toward Mom and Dad. Come on, Josh, I whispered. We're taking a running jump and we're going to push the tree over. Come on. Without another word, we both took a step back. We just had to give the trunk a good hard push and the tree would topple right over. The roots were already almost entirely up out of the ground after all. One hard push, that's all it would take, and the sunlight would pour into the amphitheater. Beautiful golden sunlight, bright, bright sunlight. The dead people would all crumble, and Mom and Dad would be saved. All 4 of us would be saved. Come on, Josh, I whispered. Ready? He nodded, his face solemn, his eyes frightened. Okay, let's go, I cried. We both ran forward, digging our sneakers into the ground, moving as fast as we could, our arms outstretched and ready. In a second, we hit the tree trunk and we pushed with all our strength, shoving it with our hands and then moving our shoulders into it, pushing, and it didn't budge. Chapter 18. This is the last chapter. Are you ready? Push, I cried. Push it again. Josh let out an exacerbated, defeated sigh. I can't, Amanda. I can't move. Josh, I glared at him. He backed up to try again. Below, I could hear startled voices, angry voices. Quick, I yelled. Push! We hurtled into the tree with our shoulders, both of us grunting from the effort, our muscles straining, our faces bright red. Push! Keep pushing! The veins at my temples felt about to pop. Was the tree moving? No. It gave a little, but it bounced right back. The voice from below was getting louder. We can't do it, I cried, so disappointed, so frustrated, so terrified, we can't move it. What's the matter, Ashton? Hold on one second, Ben, and I'll finish reading this book. What's the matter? All right, give me a second, Ashton. All right, I'll get you cookies in a second. Defeated, I slumped over onto the tree trunk and started to bury my face into my hands. I pulled back with a gasp when I heard the soft crackling sound. The cracking grew louder until it was a rumble, then a roar, and it sounded as if the ground was ripping apart. The old tree fell quickly. It didn't have far to fall, but it hit with a thundering crash that seemed to shake the ground. I grabbed Josh, and we both stood in amazement and disbelief as bright sunlight poured into the amphitheater. Go get your bowl. The cries went up instantly. Horrified cries, angry cries, frantic cries. The cries became howls of pain and agony. The people in the amphitheater, the living dead caught in the golden light, began scrambling over one another, screeching, pulling, climbing, pushing, trying to claw their way to shade. Here we go. I'll get you more water. But it was too late. Their skin began to drop off their bones, and as I stared open-mouthed, they crumbled to powder and dissolved in the ground, their clothes disintegrating along with them. The painful cries continued to ring out as their bodies fell apart. I saw Karen Somerset stagger across the floor. I saw her hair fall to the ground in a heap, revealing the dark skull underneath. She cast a glance up at me, a long look of regret. And then her eyeballs rolled out of their sockets and she opened her toothless mouth and cried, "Thank you, Amanda, thank you," and collapsed. Josh and I covered our ears to shut out the ghastly cries. We both looked away, unable to keep watching the entire town fall in agony and crumble to powder, destroyed by the sun and the clear, warm sun. When we looked back, they had all disappeared. Mom and Dad were standing right there where they had been, tied back to back. Their expressions was a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Mom, Dad," I cried. I'll never forget their smiles as Josh and I ran forward to free them. It didn't take our parents long to get us packed up and arrange for the movers to take us back to our old neighborhood, to our old house. "I guess it's lucky after all that we didn't sell our old place," Dad said as we eagerly piled into the car to leave. Dad backed down the driveway and started to roar away. "Stop," I cried suddenly. I'm not sure why, but I had a sudden, powerful urge to take one last look at the old house. As both of my parents called out to me in confusion, I pushed open the door. I jogged back to the driveway. Standing in the middle of the yard, I stared up at the house. Silent, empty, still covered in thick layers of blue-gray shadows. I found myself gazing at the old house as if I were hypnotized. I don't know how long I had stood there. The crunch of tires on the gravel driveway snapped me out of my spell. Startled, I turned to see a red station wagon parked in the driveway. 2 boys about Josh's age jumped out of the back. Their parents followed, staring up at the house. They didn't seem to notice me. "Here we are, kids," the mother said, smiling. "Our new house." "It doesn't look new. It looks old," one of them said. And then his brothers widened as he noticed me. "Who are you?" he demanded. The other members of the family turned to stare at me. His question caught me by surprise. I could hear my dad honking his horn impatiently. "I used to live in your house," I found myself answering, and then I turned and ran full speed down the street. Wasn't that Mr. Dawes standing at the porch, clipboard in his hand? I wondered, catching a glimpse of a dark figure as I ran to the car. No, it couldn't be Mr. Dawes up there waiting for them, I decided. It just couldn't be. I didn't look back. I slammed the car door behind me, and we sped away. So, Ben, I hope you like that. I couldn't wait to finish it, and I wanted to make sure that you heard the ending. I really miss you, and I went through your work, and you're doing a really great job. I'm really proud of you. I've been getting updates from Mom, so just keep up the great work. We only have a few weeks left. 8th grade graduation will be done virtually on the computer. I'll send Mom a link so that you and Mom can watch it. It's going to be on Monday, June 15th at 6 o'clock. So that's something to celebrate because you'll be officially done middle school and you'll be a high schooler next year. But I just wanted to let you know I missed you and I hope you like the end of the book.